Hi guys, Claudia Boleyn here, and today we're talking about WandaVision episode 4. So today's episode was not what I expected at all. I was told that we were going to get answers in this episode, and we definitely did, but those answers kind of gave us more questions. There's so much to say about this amazing episode. There's not actually a lot of Wanda and Vision, and there's none of the twins in this episode. I thought maybe there'd be twins, so they're coming up next week. So this is probably going to be a shorter video, because they're the characters that I have a lot of information on, but I do have some information from the comics which might be of use about Monica Rambeau. So today's episode was all about Monica. I mean, technically it was about Monica, Jimmy and Darcy, and I really love how the perspective has shifted, and it's a sign of how well it was done, because my favourite characters are Wanda, Vision, the kids, and Pietro, who isn't here yet, but there's still time. So this was a very Wanda and Vision light episode, so this was very much... I don't know how many of you guys watch Doctor Who. I'm a big Doctor Who fan. I was on the official Doctor Who time team in Doctor Who magazine. I wrote an article for the Doctor Who magazine quite recently interviewing an amazing writer of the show, but this episode felt so Doctor Who. It felt like an episode where the Doctor is out of the picture for a while and it's time for the companions to shine. And you get that kind of switch where you get the really human perspective of something incredible. And I think especially in a piece of media where everyone is like a superhero, or most of our characters are superheroes, it can be really refreshing to see ordinary people like trying to do their bit. I loved it. So the intro with Monica was incredible. So we saw Monica waking up after the snap, so we find out that Monica had been one of the people who disappeared during the snap. And sadly, while she was gone, her mum, Maria Rambeau, who was Captain Marvel's best friend / girlfriend, I mean, that's not confirmed, but they're totally girlfriends, from Captain Marvel, sadly she's passed away, I think from cancer, and we actually have Monica rematerialising next to an empty bed. So we presume that she was waiting for her mum to come round from her operation, maybe from her chemo. In the second year that she was gone, Maria's cancer came back, so we assume that the first time the cancer didn't get her, the second time it did, and she died without her daughter, which is really tragic and horrible, because, you know, if you watch Captain Marvel, you will love that mother and daughter so much. And there was something so painful about the fact that she disappeared next to her mother's bed, waiting for her mum and supporting her mum, and she came back, but it was too late. There's something so Doctor Who-ish about that. I loved it, but I also hated it. So we also found out about what's been going on in Monica's life since we last saw her as a little girl in Captain Marvel. So inspired by Carol, it seems like she's gone to space. She was part of the astronaut training program. She's pretty angry in this episode that she's been grounded and she's not allowed to go back to space, and she is so much like Carol, you know, the same sort of anger that she's being held back when she has the potential to do something. I love that she's the sort of person that you can kind of push down over and over again, but she will get back up like Carol. I just like the little character building touches that let us know that she is a hero. A currently non-superpowered hero, by the way. I say currently because she will probably go on to have her powers, and I'll talk about that in a bit. I love that she was the first person back at work at SWORD after she disappeared. It's just very much in her character. So we also find out that Maria's life, after Carol goes off into space to help the universe, she actually founds SWORD. So that was pretty exciting, and it doesn't go that way in the comics. In the comics, Maria is a much more minor role. She's still Monica's mother, but she is not the creator of SWORD. So they've slightly changed the name of SWORD from what it is in the comics. So in the comics, it's the Sentient World Observation and Response Department. I had to write that down. But in the MCU and in WandaVision, they've changed it to Sentient Weapon Observation and Response Division. So something else very Doctor Who-y / Torchwood-y that I really liked about this, and the characterisation of Monica, who is absolutely companion material, and that's the highest, that's the absolute highest compliment I can pay a character, is that while she's been away, instead of exploring the universe and learning and observing, it seems like SWORD has started to specialise in AI and more technical stuff, and they're now becoming creators of such weapons potentially, or things that make her feel uncomfortable, because when she got on board, and presumably how Maria made it, inspired by them knowing Carol, was more of an observation organisation, you know, to watch, to learn, to protect. I just loved that when Hayward said to her that the universe was full of threats, she responded really calmly. She just said, yeah, it always was, but it's also full of allies. So we've gone back in time for this episode, so we are seeing how Monica ended up in this weird situation in the first place. So she gets sent to New Jersey to investigate a missing persons case, which she's not happy about, and she there meets Jimmy Woo, lovely Jimmy Woo. Jimmy Woo is probably my favourite civilian character in the MCU. I just love him so much. You'll know him from Ant-Man. I probably don't need to tell you that, but just in case. And again, it feels really Doctor Who-y because these two human characters characters have come across this kind of alien situation or this weird and creepy town. They're trying to investigate it. So the police officers standing outside say that there is no Westview, which is weird because we've seen on Monica's way there that there's a sign that says Westview. Now, we don't know whether this is amnesia, so Wanda has taken over this place, which is obviously a place, according to Monica and Jimmy. They know of this place, Westview. It's a real place to them. So either she's taken over this place and given everyone amnesia so they forget it's there, which again is very Doctor Who, like a perception filter kind of thing, or she's created Westview herself, and because of her reality altering powers, she's made it a real thing in the universe. But the fact that the police officer mentions Eastview makes me think that it's probably more the amnesia thing, because Wanda probably wouldn't have any need to create something so elaborate and create a neighbouring town. So something I don't have any theories for is the amount of people, the population of the town of Westview. So I believe the population is 3,892. I feel like that probably, there'll probably be a reason behind that. Just like in the first episode, we saw the subtle reference to one of the Grim Reaper comics on the license plate of Wanda and Vision's car. So I feel like that probably has meaning, but I haven't looked into that yet, so if you know what that means, please tell me in the comments. We also found out that the toy helicopter we saw in episode 2 wasn't actually Monica entering the universe in a helicopter. I think a lot of us assumed that she would be piloting a helicopter in because her mum was a pilot. It was just a drone. It was a drone that she was flying in, and she ended up getting sucked in because, just like the perfect Doctor Who companion, she couldn't help herself, she had to touch the thing, and in she went, she was absorbed. So I don't know how much you know about Monica Rambeau from the comics, and I don't know a huge amount about her on her own as a character, but she does pop up in some of the comics that I like and the comics that I've read. Okay, so I'm jumping in here with a voiceover because this is super confusing and I rambled a lot. So, the first Captain Marvel was Captain Marvel, a Kree warrior. In the comics, he's a dude, but in the Captain Marvel film, we have a female Captain Marvel, and it's a similar story where, as a Kree, Captain Marvel is brought up to fight the Skrulls, only he's a good guy at heart, and he decides he wants peace with the Skrulls instead. He's kidnapped by the Skrulls at one point, with Quicksilver and the Scarlet Witch, and while he's there, he falls in love with a Skrull princess, which leads to the birth of one of my favourite comics characters ever. Anyway, this change of heart turns his own people, the Kree, against him, and the Skrulls are mostly against him too, because he's a Kree. So he dedicates his life to being a defender of the Earth. But Captain Marvel sadly dies of cancer, and at this point, although Carol Danvers is in the comics, she's Ms. Marvel. So after Captain Marvel as Captain Marvel, Monica Rambeau takes up the title and is the first female Captain Marvel. So she was exposed to extra-dimensional energy during an explosion, and she ended up with the power to control radiation, electricity, and light. She can fly, absorb energy, and can phase through things a bit like Vision. In the comics, she's an Avenger, and at one point she's actually their leader, and not many people know that. Her time as Captain Marvel is cut short because she becomes injured and she has to step down, which means that the title then passes on to Captain Marvel's son, not my favourite son of his, another son, and Monica then takes on the name of Photon instead. But for some reason, Captain Marvel's not very nice son wants that title as well. He literally steals the name Photon, so Monica has to become Pulsar instead. If you're wondering where Carol is in all this, it takes her forever to become Captain Marvel. There are many people who take the title before she does, and Carol only actually gets it, I think, in 2012, I could be wrong. A fun fact that links all this Captain Marvel stuff to WandaVision, sort of, other than the fact that Monica's obviously in it, is that the original Captain Marvel's secret son with a Skrull princess ends up being Wanda's son-in-law. So that's Hulkling, otherwise known as Teddy Altman, otherwise known as the love of Billy's life. So if we don't meet Teddy in WandaVision, we are sure to meet Teddy very soon. Okay, I'm going to pass back over to myself now. Apologies past Claudia, but you rambled a lot. Monica also has more direct links to Billy Kaplan, so that is Wanda's son, one of her lovely sons, because she is on a team called Strike Force, and I have the comic here. So I'm going to put that up to the screen. There, my friends, is Monica Rambeau, and there is the lovely Billy. So they're on a team together at one point. This is quite a recent comic that actually got cancelled for some reason. But yeah, they're on a team, and they're also on a team with Bucky Barnes. So Bucky is also on that team. Anyway, back to the episode. So we have Monica, we have Jimmy, and we have Darcy. So when Monica goes missing, obviously Sword is desperate to find her because she's an important agent and she's also the daughter of the person who created them. So they call in Darcy Lewis, who we know from Thor. So she was Jane Foster's assistant. Which again is interesting going forward because we know that Jane is going to become Thor going forward, and we're not quite sure how that's going to work, but that's an interesting link to Phase 4. Everything in the show seems to link to stuff that's coming up, so everything is so exciting. So I spoke to Dan this morning about the episode, and I know I like big him up every single time I do these videos, but I do it for a reason. He's my brother, he's the Pietro to my Wanda, he's wonderful. You can follow him here, this is his Twitter. He's also an actor, so if anyone from the MCU is watching this, he's a fantastic actor. Hire him. But we both really love the sequence where we can actually see Sword using their different theories and looking up the different people in the sitcom based on face recognition technology, and they were all getting put up on the board. So a couple of things about this. So you might notice that Agnes on that board does not have a driver's license, so it fits the theory that she is actually an ancient witch from the Salem witch trials that made a deal to get her life back, and that's why she's not like a usual citizen, she's not a modern day citizen. Also, Dottie wasn't on the board, Dan noticed, and we're not quite sure why. I love that Jimmy Woo was writing down all the questions that we had, and I just think it's so refreshing in a show. Like, you get certain shows, I'm not going to name names, but they want viewers to be involved and to theorise, but then they kind of mock the viewers for theorising and make the viewers feel kind of small. But this show is really embracing that element, and we're seeing the characters doing what we are, and it just feels really satisfying. It's not trying to be too clever, it just really is clever, like it genuinely is clever. So from the outside perspective, we saw who the beekeeper was, so he's just a guy from Sword, an agent in a protective suit, and I think Wanda's reality has to change things to things that don't remind her of modern day and things that fit the time period, so he became a beekeeper. But the biggest reveal of this episode was the fact that Vision is dead. So I know we know that Vision is technically dead, but we weren't sure how he was existing in this universe, if Wanda had used her powers to completely bring him back, if he'd been rebuilt on the outside somehow. But I jumped out of my skin when I saw it. But yeah, Vision is just walking around. He is black and white, he's lost all his colour, and his head is still caved in from where Thanos ripped the stone from his head. So that made the opening piece of dialogue from Wanda more painful, didn't it? My husband and his indestructible head. But we are now sort of realising, I just love how they're doing this so cleverly. Like, the duality of this is just so great. That we are seeing from Wanda's perspective, and we have seen enough from her perspective, that she doesn't come across as a villain, she comes across as sympathetic. But from the perspective we've got this episode, we're also seeing why people on the outside would view her as very terrifying and a villain and someone that's really dangerous. So you felt really sorry for her. Like, I loved the sequence where we saw her throw Monica out of the universe, where Wanda was quite terrifying, but also didn't seem 100% in control of herself. So obviously she wanted her out of the universe because she reminded her of Pietro and Ultron, and it seems that in this universe Wanda can't take it, or Wanda can't maintain the universe or the illusion if she thinks about it too much. So it's like she's constantly distracting herself, otherwise it falls to pieces. Because after she throws Monica out, she looks at Vision and she's horrified to see that he's dead. So that absolutely broke my heart. It's one of my favourite things in fiction in general, the idea that you have a couple or a loved one and one of the couple loses the other one, and they are just so desperate to have them back, and they imagine it and they fight for them. Like, it's in so many books that I love and media that I love. Like, I just love that idea. It's so, so tragic. Also reminds me a bit of, there's a Black Mirror episode called Be Right Back where a woman loses her husband and so she decides to grow a clone of him. But yeah, there's just something so tragic about that. Like, it's the most tragic love story trope, and I love it for these characters. So poor Wanda is having to maintain this universe in a way, even though she's kind of doing it herself, we assume, because Monica has told us that it's all Wanda from her perspective. Obviously it probably is still something to do with Mephisto, but as far as Monica knows, it's Wanda. But it's like she's got in so deep that she has to maintain it, because if she doesn't maintain it, she frightens herself and she can't cope, so she has a breakdown. So Wanda is obviously in the midst of a mental breakdown, imagining Vision is alive, but that raises questions about the other townspeople. So I was also talking to Dan about this. Now, are these people all dead? If these are dead people, are they really like walking around like corpses and skeletons? Has Wanda like reanimated them in her mind? I mean, how has she done that? Are they people that have just accidentally walked into Westview or been sucked into Westview, so they're real people? Are they lost souls? Is it like in the comics when she creates her twins, she reaches out to lost souls, and these are different souls that were around, people who have died in the past, like Agnes? I was saying in my last review that it seems like Herb and some of them have figured out that they're dead, which is really creepy. It may be that Vision's now going through this exact same process. So they might be dead people that are slowly realising they're dead, but they're accepting it because the other option is to just not exist at all. So they're kind of going along with it and they're kind of trapped. And we don't know if Wanda's using her powers to literally reanimate Vision and give him life by using her powers on his actual body. Like, is his body physically there? If that's the case, that might explain why Pietro isn't there yet. Because if Wanda can bring anyone to life, I've spoken about this way too much in my videos, but Pietro and Vision are the two great loves of her life, so there's no way she wouldn't bring back Pietro if she could. So does she have to have the bodies with her to do this? Also tying this into the comics a bit, so I've spoken to you about the comic House of M before, but the scene where she throws Monica out of her universe reminds me of a scene from House of M where she is with her children, she's with Tommy and Billy as little kids. Doctor Strange has broken through into her reality and is trying to gently convince her to please put the world back because things aren't right. But Hawkeye Clint Barton, who Wanda has previously accidentally killed when she was having a breakdown, he's back to life in this reality and he remembers what happened to him and he comes for her. So he enters the room that she's in with her children and he fires an arrow. So the arrow hits Wanda, she falls down, obviously because she's got such great powers it really does nothing to her, but it upsets her children. So little tiny Billy and Tommy are absolutely distraught. One of the twins, who we assume is Billy because of what he does next, starts crying and screaming about what's happened to his mother, and Hawkeye is torn apart. He just completely disapparates into kind of blocks. So he is thrown out of that universe and destroyed, and it's not something that Wanda does voluntarily, it's a very protective action, but it reminded me a lot of that. Like, there's a lot of sympathy for Wanda in this show, and I love that they're doing it like that, because it'd be so easy to just write her as like, oh, she's like such a creepy villain, but they've really grounded it in that tragedy of her character and what she's been through, and you just can't help but feel for her and root for her, and at the same time you're rooting for Monica. So in the scene where she throws Monica out into the real world again, like, it's so confusing because you feel sorry for them both, and it's very much the feeling you get in House of M as well. So I can't wait for next episode. I am praying for Pietro to come back. I mean, if Wanda can bring people back to life, if she can get souls and put them in that universe, she would bring back her brother. Like, her love for Pietro is so strong. Like, as a character, it's Pietro and it's Vision and it's obviously her boys as well. Like, that's such a huge part of her character, and we know because the writer of the series has said we're going to get more into the backstory of Wanda and Pietro, and why would they do that if we're not going to get him back? Please let's have him back. I know that at the end of the series what we're hoping is that she's going to somehow be able to bring her boys through. I don't know if Vision's going to make it, I hope he does, but if she can bring her boys through into the real reality outside, then I'm hoping that it's a happy ending story and she can bring the people in Westview back through as well, and she can also bring back her brother. Because, come on, like, not to diminish her as a character on her own, because Wanda is incredible, but it's all about Wanda and Pietro. Like, the comics are Wanda and Pietro. That brother and sister are just so important to me, and they're so important to the comics. Like, their dynamic, it's so good. Okay, I love you loads. I will see you really soon. I made this on the day it came out. I've only watched it about an hour and a half ago, so please let me know if there's anything I've missed, if there's anything you've noticed that I didn't bring up, and yeah, I'll see you next week. Alright, love you loads. Bye!